Second half of the season kicks off here tonight as we bring you Flatout Racing Network's coverage of Season 6 of the Dark Horse Racing Series presented by Troy Lee Designs. This is Kansas Speedway as drivers now are in the home stretch and preparing themselves for the big upcoming Indy 500, but more importantly for a few trying to get that championship trophy. I'm Seth Cole, being joined alongside Matthew Rodriguez. And Matt, coming into the second half of the season here, this is going to be outside of the Indy 500, the longest race distance-wise that these drivers are going to have to overcome. So, bit of an endurance race here tonight. These drivers are going to have to pace themselves.
Absolutely, and this is where you're really going to see if we end up going green in a long run. You're going to see the big strategy makers come out. You're going to see DeGroot, you're going to see Teed, you're going to see Forsyth, you're going to see Rick Ravon, you're going to see all the normal cast of characters that usually have those wacky fuel strategies kind of come out from the woodwork and try to make something work.
Last week, we ended up seeing Luis Gonzalez Nunez pick up his second win on the season. It's kind of been kept between three drivers as far as those elusive checkered flags here this year. Nunez, Forsyth, and Rick Ravon have won every single race so far. Here tonight, do we see anything different? Because I saw a good half dozen new faces up there at the top of the speed charts during practice.
Yeah, some of the new faces have kind of surprised me, and they also kind of opened my eyes. Nice to see Al Coates kind of making his return, quote unquote. I see him back in the field. Same thing with kind of just looking through, seeing if I can find any names. Dylan McIntosh. That's I think wasn't he a new name for a season? Or that name sounds really familiar.
Yeah, I believe he's run at least 2 races this season. Definitely not making his first start, I know that.
Okay, yeah, that name sounds familiar. I just couldn't put my finger on it. Yes, and then the man, the myth, the legend, Joseph Morales here, starting at P13, had that amazing move to get P5 last week.
Yes, he did. He did indeed. Green flag set to wave. It's going to be 210 miles here tonight, 140 laps in total, as Nick DeGroot will lead them into turn 1. And this is the second time this season we've seen Nick DeGroot in the field. I believe that the first time he made the start was back at Michigan. He did not win that race, so we're looking at a driver to possibly break up the Nunez, Ravon, and Forsyth trio. Look no further than the two-time champ.
I mean, you had DeGroot say it earlier, but he really isn't racing for points just with the limited schedule, so he's really trying to work on this limited schedule and say, hey, I'm just going for wins. It doesn't really matter. And that makes him one of the most dangerous opponents that you can race against of a Nick DeGroot that doesn't have to go points racing, that all his mission is just to win.
For the speeds these drivers are carrying in the draft, they're at 220 miles per hour in the corners alone, topping up to about 225 by the time they make it over into 1 and 3. So if you make moves, you have to make them in a split second, and that also counts for reactionary moves.
Yeah, I noticed a few drivers, at least on top of the green, tried to go about 2-3 wide back in the pack. Didn't really gain very much from it. Looks like the bottom is really just too dominant at the moment. And everyone just seems really content just kind of riding the train. Just trying to get a little bit of grips on the track. Obviously, the big thing that comes up every time we get to this track has to be the bottom underneath the white line. So the Dark Horse IndyCar Series, Racing Series admins have stated that they do not want any Indy cars going underneath that white line. So no left side tires, no part of your car should stay overbat. If so, you are subject to penalties. So you're going to see him just trying to ride that line, but not go any part under it.
So how difficult does that make it as far as passing? Because we've seen in the past, the previous seasons, where drivers, when they get the race lead, Nick DeGroot, one of them for sure, when they get to the race lead, they just hug that white line, force anybody that's going to try and make a pass to take the longer way around the racetrack. So taking that white line as the boundary, I mean, it kind of eliminates, 2-3 lanes down there that a driver might be able to utilize in other circumstances.
Absolutely. Like I said, I can kind of see arguments on both sides for this. Yes, it is a risk versus reward where, hey, if the leader is kind of hogging that white line, you can possibly shock him and go underneath the apron, but also, you got to remember, every time we have someone go underneath that apron, they're not obligated to come back up on track, and that could cause giant accidents, which we are trying to avoid.
Ravon comes into this race the points leader. 3 victories out of the season. Craig Forsyth, who right now is running P2 behind Nick DeGroot. He's got 2 victories, 32 points back, and then with his second win of the season last week, Luis Gonzalez Nunez, he now jumps up to third of the points. He is currently a total of 97 points out. Jeff Heisong's still in the conversation as well, 99 points back, but going back to Craig Forsyth, 2 of his victories this season have been at the bigger, high-speed racetracks, the 2 Mile Auto Club, and then the following week at the 1.5 Mile at Kentucky. We talked to him last week. He said he had a lot of confidence coming into tonight's race here at Kansas. Not as much a fan of the smaller ovals. We've got Homestead next week as well. So is this the chunk of the season where Craig Forsyth has to turn up the wick to close up that points gap between himself and Ramon?
Realistically, yes. Now, there has been talk, and I think Rick Rayvon may have mentioned it himself, where he will end up missing one race here. Now, I believe that the series still has one drop week that won't affect him too much as long as he only misses that one race. But you always got to remember in the back of your head of, hey, this is a great opportunity for Forsyth, for Luis Gonzalez Nunez, really to capitalize on that one race that he may not be there.
I believe that Craig Forsyth has made every start so far this season. We know that Luis Gonzalez Nunez, when we talked to him in Victory Lane last week, with that drop week, he'll be utilizing that with the season opener that he was unable to start. But it'll be interesting to see if Forsyth makes every start here once the drop week is in effect. A big move there by Rick Rayvon on the inside of Eric Peterson. Thinks better it tucks back in line, but it's interesting to see which race it is that Craig Forsyth elects to use the drop week as, because he could take the worst finish that he has of the season and basically eliminate it.
Yeah, so usually how the drop weeks works is it just automatically selects the lowest result and just erases it from your record. So it actually kind of a weird thing that it's hard to mention how dominant Craig Forsyth has been on these larger tracks, because he has actually not finished outside of the top 3 this entire season, except for one occasion at Pocono at the beginning of the season when he was going 3 wide with Matt Wagner. And it stands to reason that, honestly, he probably could have had all top 3 finishes this season. So take away that one bad finish, hey, he is right in the conversation.
Definitely, for sure. And you have to wonder, too, where that would end up positioning him in relation to Rick Rayvon. Would the points gap be smaller than it is right now, those 32 points? Looking here at Luis Gonzalez Nunez right now in the 11th position. That's where he started, has not made any forward progress. He's trying to get something going there on the top side. He's been in a bit of a dogfight with Alec Coates and Dylan McIntosh, but has not been able to make any forward progress. So says to me that at least here in the early going, and maybe when we get later on to this race as well, track position is going to be the most important factor into whether you're going to win this race or not.
Yeah, so I'm kind of looking at this, and right now I think it's really just a waiting game. So Craig Forsyth, I think he kind of has a plan in mind, and it's kind of weird to be talking fuel mileage on lap 15, but you kind of have to start planning out the rest of your race. So I think really Craig Forsyth is not really in a huge rush to try and pass the group. Just kind of right behind him, take your fuel mileage and just kind of live with it. Same thing with Charles Teed. Hey, he's just riding here. He knows he has the speed to be up there and fight for it, but right now is not the time. Then you get a little bit further back in the pack. Eric Peterson just wants to make it through a race without getting hit. And Rick Rayvon, he's trying to claw his way up to Craig Forsyth so he can start really battling him for points.
And that Jeff Heisong, currently running in the 9th position. He has gained the most spots since the start of the race, and also mention the fact that he's 4th in the overall point standings as well. Kind of been a little bit of a under-the-radar driver in some sense, as we've not seen him up at the front, but we've seen him consistently, if not in the latter portion of the top 5, at least up in the top half of 6th through 10th. So he's been able to, as we say, through consistency, been able to keep himself up there in the point standings. At some point, though, you gotta start turning into podium finishes if you're going to be battling for this championship with the top 3.
And see, that's the thing where Heisong has been someone who's always in the conversation, but never really the favorite, per se. Because if you look at his results, his favorite track, or at least his favored track, seems to be all over the place, where he has 2 best finishes of the season of 4th. He obviously 2 times. Once at Milwaukee, which is a very small, short oval, and once at Michigan, which is a very long oval, and he only got that off of a last lap incident that took out a bunch of cars. So realistically, Jeff Heisong has been showing up at the smaller tracks, but when we get to these bigger circuits, he just hasn't been able to really show out.
I'm noticing a number of drivers here now that are migrating up to that second lane. There you see Rick Rabon. He's actually going to try and see if he can complete the pass around Eric Peterson for fourth place down the back straightaway. Also saw Gary Corley up there. Charles Teed was up there for a time or two. Are these drivers trying to maybe just lay down some rubber up there, add in some grip, make a second lane?
No, realistically, what I think it is Rick Ray Vaughn believes he's faster than Eric Peterson, so he's trying really everything he can to kind of push the issue to get by him. Because realistically, it's kind of like a balancing act and just pick him off one at a time where, hey, if I can just pass this one guy in front of me, I'll be one position higher. If I pass a guy in front of him, I'll be another position higher. And hey, do it 2 more times and I'll be in the race lead.
Nunez is making up ground now on that top side. Last time we saw him, he was in 12th. He's trying to get the 9th position away from Joe McIntyre. And we got a spinner up ahead. Rick Rayvon and Nunez is involved in it. We got a car way up in the air. That's Rayvon again. We've got 2 more drivers involved. That is McMurray and Joe McIntyre. Another driver there as well. I believe that's Jason Hand. We've got at least 5, maybe a half dozen drivers all torn up there, littering the back straightaway.
I don't...
Oh, and we got further contact there between McAdory and Luis Gonzalez Nunez.
Yeah, I think Luis is just having trouble kind of controlling his car here at the moment.
I don't think anybody's able to drive their cars back right now. There's suspension damage on, I think, every single one of these drivers' machines.
I'd say that was... I don't... I'm having trouble with that one.
Jason Hand, front wheels skewed to about 11 o'clock. Surprised he didn't come down pit road that lap.
And it looks like
Rick Rayvon now passing by as well.
Rick Rayvon's going to go a lap down.
I think he's probably going to as the leaders are coming in. Oh, gracious. This is a bit of a hindrance for the top drivers coming down to the attention of their crews. And people are probably wondering, well, why are these drivers trying to nurse these machines back to pit road? Well, the reason is they run a better chance of not going a lap down if they drive it back. They're certainly going to lose a lap or 2 if they have to call a tow. But to your point, Rick Rayvon, his car comes to a stop there on pit lane, and he is going to have to call a tow there. Let's go back and see what exactly happened there, because we caught just the tail end of that spin on our camera shot.
I'm having trouble with this incident. The reason I'm having trouble with this incident is obviously I can tell that that kind of falls under my definition of a racing incident, where the car on the bottom comes up on the track and the car on top comes down. However, I've got a few fundamental issues with this. One, yes, Eric Peterson looks like he just misses entry a little bit. That's all fine and dandy, but it's kind of what I've been nailing down for the last few laps is I don't see a reason to race that aggressively on lap 22 of 140, where I know I want to get up through the field, but we're not losing any time off the leaders. I'm having trouble understanding it.
Well, I got a point and then a question. Just back behind this contact, I was about to say I thought Nunez was going to get spun because the car he was passing at the time, Joe McIntyre, appeared to also be pushing up. And that leads me to the question, it would seem that, 20 some odd laps into a run, that's where the drivers on the inside must really be feeling that aero tightness with that right front tire heat kicking up. We saw there the push up by the 36, and then obviously the almost push up by the 312.
I'll bring an alternative take into this, where realistically, the one comparison I can draw between McAdory and the Rayvon incident, where if you look at it, the moment that you get alongside someone, the aerodynamics of these cars change, and they drive so much differently. So I really think it may have just been taking the air off the car a little bit, pushing it up the hill. Obviously, not to that greater extent with Luis Gonzalez Nunez, but if you looked at Rayvon, he was pretty much right on the side pod. Let's say I think the fault is on both parties here, but I hate to see these cars torn up on lap 22.
This is on board with Jason Hand, who almost had it avoided, just barely got clipped to the right rear, and then you see the contact there. It sends him up onto two wheels. Look at him working the wheel back and forth, trying to get that thing settled back down. Might have gotten a little assistance there from Addis McMurray, but able to drive it back as well, as we are back to green. So apparently the pace laps don't take very long here.
Yeah, and realistically, this is one of the great parts about Kansas where it has that feeling of a much bigger track like Michigan, but it's also in that nice compact size as of Kansas. So that's the kind of the good part about this track. Now, if you look at here, obviously the restarts really bunch and kind of sort a lot of these guys out. So if you look at here, Nick DeGroot, Craig Forsyth, Charles Steed all took off. Then you've got the second pack of Eric Peterson, Alec Coates, and Gary Corley. Then Joseph Morales, I'm actually happy to see him running up this high. He's having some good strides recently. And then past that, you have Nunez, Thaddeus McMurray, McIntosh, Hysung, Joe McAdory, and Hand. And then you have Rick Ravon. Looks like he just passed turn one now, so he's very behind.
2 laps down when he returned back to the track, and to your point, could be in danger of going a third lap down. 1 lap down apiece for Nunez and Hand, and after everything we saw take place, a half dozen drivers are already a faster pair in the hole. They would include Thaddeus McMurray, Jeff Hysong, Joe McAdory, Luis Gonzalez Nunez, Jason Hand, and Rick Ravon. So those drivers don't have a mulligan anymore, but with the field being spread out the way it is, they might not necessarily have to worry about their equipment getting torn up unless that second pack can maybe draft up to the first pack, and then Pack 3 could draft up to Pack 1, because I'm seeing a big bunch of drivers back there around McMurray, Morales, McIntosh, and company.
I think Nunez is driving just a little bit angry. He's trying to drive back up through this field. But the big thing I really want to stress is guys like Nunez and Ravon who have really a lot to gain and lose out of this situation. The biggest thing is you can't start overdriving the car to get yourself in a worse situation. All it's going to do is really put you in a worse strategy position, or it's going to have you end up pushing too hard and possibly wrecking the car. The best thing you can do right now, try to run to your max of your ability, keep running with your strategy, hope a caution flies when you need one, and unfortunately that's kind of all you can do when you're in this situation, is to cross your fingers and hope that someone else makes that big mistake.
Alec Coates right now in the 5th position, right behind Eric Peterson, trying to catch up to that top trio. We saw him start out the year really well, that runner-up finish at Pocono, and looking for another potential podium finish here tonight. Charles Teed up ahead. He keeps trying to poke the nose out there at Craig Forsyth. Forsyth seems pretty committed to stay behind Nick DeGroot. And now going back to the Forsyth situation, 2 of your top competitors there in the point standings are both off the lead lap. Nunez -1, Ravon -2. Does that change up your strategy now on how aggressive you might be with Nick DeGroot? Because you got your competition off the lap that you're on, and so you're gaining points on them in that regard. I mean, are you at the end of this race going to be that anxious to maybe put yourself in a bad predicament and try to get this victory, or do you just settle in and say, you know what, I'm happy with the points I'm going to get here?
Absolutely not. I'd take my points. I mean, here's the thing. When you look at Luis Gonzalez Nunez, he's about 90 points back from the leader, who's Rick Ravon at the moment. Hey, that's 90 points that he's not going to be able to make up. I'm ahead of him. Look at Rick Ravon. He is behind Nunez. He is currently on track to finish P14 out of 15 cars, and only 14 cars took the green flag. So realistically, you're in for a great points day, but don't push the car. Don't push yourself into a mistake. We saw it last week with Rick Ravon making that really fatal error about 8 laps from the checkered, and hey, you threw away a perfectly good win. That's it. If you're in the lead and Nick DeGroot's really pushing, I'd rather let him have it and take my second place points than possibly wreck myself for first.
This is a really tough situation for Rick Ravon, too, if you consider the fact that we already documented he's going to be missing a week in October. And so if he ends up finishing, even back in 12th, 13th, if a couple of drivers don't reach the conclusion of this race, I mean, he doesn't have the option pretty much then of being able to utilize the drop week for this week. It would end up going towards that week he's not going to make. So the worst finish he had coming into tonight was an 8th place finish. This is by far on pace to be the worst finish of the season for the former champion.
Let's say I'm not counting Rick Ray out yet. There's still a lot of time left in this race. It's one of our longest races of the season, minus Indy. So, like I said, there's still a lot of time to pull yourself out of this hole, but you're gonna have to be smart about it. You can't really push the envelope. You have to kind of take what you're given.
Yep.
But here's the big thing. This is the point in the season that you really need to go bigger picture racing. You can't be worried about these individual race wins. Yes, I want to win races. Yes, I think it can really help. But I'm not going to put myself in a bad situation where I'm going to risk the bigger picture championship at the end of the season just because I want a race win. It's not worth it at all.
Here's an interesting scenario. They have caught Rick Ray.
Caution.
Oh, caution. Nunez again. And
Yeah,
also it looks like Jason Hand. No, sorry, that's Status McMurray in the 37.
Oh! Yeah, it looks like Nunez was pitting in, just misjudged it just a little bit, caught that apron, and shot him straight up the track, straight into Thaddeus McMurray.
And I think that might be night over for last week's winner, Luis Gonzalez Nunez. He had already used his faster pair under the last caution.
I said that hurts. I mean, hey, it's lap 38, and you haven't even gotten halfway through this race, and like I said this. Now I know that I think there's a little bit of frustration on Nunez's side because I know he was announcing that he was pitting in multiple times, and he still wasn't really given that room on the bottom. But also, that was a really early entry.
Take a look at it here through 3 and 4. It's weird. He was heading down towards the white line, and it was almost like I don't want to say that the car jumped. That's almost seems like the way to describe it. It jumped back up the racetrack about a half groove. I think it caught Thaddeus McMurray by surprise.
Yeah, no, it's as soon as you catch that bottom apron with the left side tire, it pretty much just bottoms out and shoots you up the track. And when it shoots you up the track, there's really nothing you can do. Even if Thaddeus McMurray was higher up the track, I think Luis would have went higher and ended up catching him anyway. So, like I said, I don't think it really would have affected the outcome, but still, it's just kind of unfortunate error and not enough kind of reaction time there.
Now, with Nunez calling over the comms that he was coming to pit lane, should the 37 have been running higher on the track and not directly in his tire tracks through turn 3?
See, that's where I'm divided, where my brain says, hey, listen, this guy's coming in the pit road. I probably should run a little bit higher on the track just so I can continue going past at a higher rate of speed. But also there's my heart that says, well, listen, I'm not going to give up the preferred lane on track just for you to go slow around the corner to get the pit road. You're an experienced driver. You're up there on points. You should know how to get the pit road. And that's kind of the risk versus reward where it sounds dumb, but Luis is going not really points racing. He's going for wins. And that's what he wants. That's really what's going to get him back in this championship. So he felt that was a risk he had to take.
Wild ride there for Thaddeus McMurray, and I love with the onboard we can see that thing's flipping, that thing's barrel rolling, and he's still driving the race car. He'll still turn. But that is going to pretty much be end of the night for both McMurray and Nunez. Again, both of those drivers were involved in the first caution of the night. Had to take their faster pair on at that point in time, and officially, McMurray has had his car pushed back to the garage. Nunez still sits on pit lane. I don't know what they possibly think they could do to be able to get him back out there and salvage anything, as he's already trapped 3 laps down and no doubt going to lose a lot more laps before all is said and done.
Yeah, that gets you in that risk versus reward strategy where Rick Ray didn't really benefit from this caution at all. Anything he would have gained, he pretty much just kind of lost. So this is where that uphill battle kind of starts, and you have to slowly claw your way back and hope to luck out with a lot of these strategies.
Well, in one sense, it kind of helped Rick Ray and, well, kind of, I would say 1.5 ways it helped. The one way it helped for sure is the timing of the caution. He was able to stay ahead of race leader Nick DeGroot, so he did not go a 3rd lap down. I believe Jason Hand got the free pass under this yellow, so now Rick Ravon is the only driver that is off the lead lap, -2. Any cautions from now on, unless we have another driver fall a lap down, he would be in line for the free pass position.
Yeah, but it's kind of that rough point that you don't want to really rely on this. But unfortunately, you have to. So you have to manage to get past these two accidents because you need basically two cautions to get you back in this race. But you also have to be far enough away where you're not going to be involved in the accident, but also ahead of Thaddeus McMurray, ahead of all your competition, so you don't end up losing that lucky dog position to them.
And officially, Nunez is out of the race, so we will have 12 drivers still remaining, 11 of them on the lead lap. Rick Ravon, the only one that is -2 laps down, as Nick DeGroot, who has pretty much led every lap so far here tonight, is going to lead us back to green. Forsyth in second. Teed, Peterson, and Corley going to be the top 5. You know, something that just kind of popped into my mind, going back to what we saw happen to Nunez. We've yet to see a round of green flag pit stops, but I really get the feeling the longer this race goes on, the more spread out these drivers get. We probably will see at least 1, maybe 2 rounds before the conclusion of this race. Is this going to make drivers kind of question their strategy on how to get to pit road now,
Oh,
especially
Rick
in terms of
Ravon pushing it
communication?
3 wide. What in the world is he doing?
Trying to go around the outside of Joe McIndory and Dylan McIntosh, and it's going to work as McIntosh kind of was the one that backed out of that situation. I mean, for some of these guys now,
I don't understand it. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. Why you're in the lucky dog position? You need to not be in this caution when it ends up coming out, trying to get your lap back. Why push it 3 wide trying to cause it where you're going to end up being involved in it? I don't understand.
Maybe a sense of urgency, feeling if you get up to the front, maybe past the leaders and get one of your laps back the hard way, then you'll have a chance of possibly getting the lucky dog and getting both laps back in one shot.
I don't know. He's playing a high risk, high reward strategy. I don't know. That must be next level. I must not be that fast.
Get really racy here for third. Saw some big moves being made off of turn 2 last time with Eric Peterson and Charles Teed. Peterson again going to dive to the inside of Teed. Going into turn 3. Like Teed might have actually left the door open for him purposely, letting the 36 around. Then you get Gary Corley and Alec Coates there in 5th and 6th tandeming as well.
Teed's still trying to make that inside work. It seems really right now that Eric Peterson and Teed are really just kind of swapping positions. I don't know if they're trying that old school leapfrogging technique, just trying to get drafted and just keep moving.
I mean, we've seen that happen before. Auto Club in Michigan are usually the tracks that we see that kind of strategy implemented the most. On the flip side, Craig Forsyth and Nick DeGroot, it's almost like they're in stock cars. They got the bumpers or lack thereof hooked up here, trying to tandem away from the rest of the field.
And see, that's what really hurts a lot of the stock car guys coming over into Indy cars and not having that traditional really setup. Because I think you've talked about it before, or maybe I've talked about it before. Just the difference in running stock cars here versus Indy cars. I mean, the stock cars, you want to go all the way down to the grass. You want to cut all the way through that apron. You want to make it in a straight line through the front straightaway. Where here, it's really draft is more important than cutting the fastest line around the track.
I think Forsyth and DeGroot realized, we got to start doing the swap as well, because the gap was starting to close up between themselves as well as 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. Now they've gone to swapping the position back and forth here. So that's the first time that Nick DeGroot has let anybody get by him for the race lead here tonight, and it happens about 50 laps in.
I don't know. I like Teed and Peterson. I think they've got that into a nice rhythm. It looks like they've done this 100 times and just slowly working their way back up.
They are indeed. It's only about 1.2 seconds between them and that top duo. Plus, add in the fact they've got a couple more numbers in this group. If you also add in the 7 and the 10. Also got Joe McIndory back there and Dylan McIntosh, Joseph Morales, Jeff Heisog. They're all trying to figure out how in a pack of 4 or 5 they can be able to reel in this battle of 3rd through 6th. Gap now 1.1 seconds, so they are slowly making progress on the top 2, if only by a 10th a lap.
I'd say slowly but surely, but again, it's kind of one of those slowly but surely, it'll win the race. That's it. Just got to have some patience and got to make sure that, hey, when we do end up having green flag pit stops, you hit your marks. don't speed, don't brake too early, but also just make sure that you're not losing any time trying to get on pit road.
So I had a lot to cover there on that restart, but you bring up green flag pit stop, so I'm going to just go back to that question I was going to ask you about with what we saw with Luis Gonzalez Nunez making the call. He was coming to pit lane, but then got run over as he was trying to slow that thing on the inside of 3 and 4. Is that going to make drivers kind of reevaluate how they're going to approach getting onto pit lane, especially in terms of communication?
Yeah, my idea, at least my understanding of the incident, was that Luis was actually on all teams. So iRacing has multiple different forms of communication. Most popularly, when you're in race, it is driver's chat. And driver's chat can only be talked to by the drivers, no spotters, no nothing else. To my knowledge, that Luis was on all teams, which is available to obviously all teams. But however, when you're in the car, all teams, the channel all teams is muted automatically by the service. So realistically, when Luis was yelling all or pitting, he was yelling it on all teams, where it really would have been whoever has it unmuted would have heard him. Everyone else who didn't unmute it would never have heard him pitting. So it was probably caught some of these guys off guard.
Right on board with a couple of these drivers, showing you the art of the swapping back and forth. You kind of liken this to locking bumpers in a stock car. This is how the Indy cars are able to keep forward momentum at high speed, consistent. And also see there on the dash of the steering wheel, gives them the lap time so they can kind of do a little bit of comparison to the leaders. You see there with Peterson, his last time by, 24.58. There you see a 5.3. Nick DeGroot, who was the one that did the slingshot the last lap, ran a 5.0. So they're right in the same vicinity, right in the same neighborhood lap times wise are these two sets of tandems.
If you really want a good indicator of how much faster it is, look at the Rick Ray Vaughan, Joe McAdory group. They have not really been swapping draft positions. They've kind of just been riding in a line and looking at the lap time difference between these two cars, where it's about 0.2, 0.3 seconds of a lap quicker by just doing this quick swap. And you think it would actually take more time, but no, it actually saves you a lot more time.
And 0.2, 0.2 of a second, that doesn't seem like much, but when you consider it with these type of race cars, these open wheel race cars, even hundredths is a huge margin.
Yeah, so like I said, just making sure you have this perfect. Where realistically, the reason I've been watching Charles Teed and Eric Peterson is they've consistently had some of the best laps on track, where they've honestly been beating Nick DeGroot and Craig Forsyth with their swapping and both having the same averages close to the low fives, where I've seen Nick DeGroot and Craig Forsyth kind of bounce between the mid fives to high sixes. So I'd be kind of entertained to see how long it may take them to catch them.
Now, one thing that we're going to have to keep an eye on here within the next, I would say, 5 laps or so is green flag pit stops. These drivers, fuel window, roughly anywhere from 40 to maybe 45 laps. They did not come to pit road under the second caution. Only a couple of drivers came down and topped off the fuel tank. So, for the most part, these leaders have been out here for about 35 to 37 laps. They were able to probably save a little bit under pacing with that second yellow, but right now, based off of calculations, they're going to have to come to pit road within the next, I would say, 5 to 10 laps at least. Definitely within the next 10 laps.
That's it. They've got a plan of when they want to pit. But the biggest thing is, hey, how much fuel are they burning / saving by doing this swap technique? But also, how does it fit into the rest of your fuel strategy? That's the big question.
Now, we saw, obviously, some issues for Luis Gonzalez Nunez getting on to
pit
Nick
DeGroot, hand out the window. He's pitting.
There he is. Yep, coming to pit lane. And I was going to ask, wow, you see right there is, I think that right front was locking up. That right front was locking up. He was headed for that orange coat. So, I mean, how difficult is it to get to pit road here? I mean, we mentioned it, 220 plus miles per hour, and then you got to get that thing wound down at the commitment line to 55 miles per hour.
Realistically, coming off that banking on that really flat apron. I mean, we saw how much Luis Gonzalez Nunez had as soon as he barely touched that apron and shot him up the track. So you really have to wait very late until the exit of 4, arc down, kind of fight the car on transition, and then obviously slow it down in that slow, sharp little period where you're able to get in And then you also have to worry when you're on pit road about the concrete pit stalls that will have you slide through your stall just a little bit too much.
Charles Teed, Eric Peterson. Oh, Teed overshot. He didn't even make it to the commitment line. He's going to have to go around again. That's going to cost him a lot of time. Peterson did make it onto pit lane. And one would have to assume that we saw Nick DeGroot come to pit lane all by his lonesome because he spent a good portion of the last two runs out in front, would have used up a lot more fuel than others.
And honestly, having both of those, that really, really hurt Eric Peterson. Because Peterson
Forsyth. Gracious.
Ooh.
All sorts of sideways to the pitman line.
Peterson was really paying attention to Teed, and it really hurt his entry on the pit road. But I think he had a lot slower entry than Nick DeGroot, so that's definitely going to cost him. And then Charles Teed, I can't even round off how much time he lost by slowing down to basically pit road entry speed and then having to ramp it back up and still having to do it again next lap.
Yeah, he is now in to the attention of his crew. Gary Corley was also the car we saw coming down behind then race leader Craig Forsyth. It's now Alec Coates that is showing the way here. Joe McAdory, Joseph Morales right now round out the top three. These guys could go a little bit further because I mentioned there were about 5-6 drivers that came to pit lane under the second caution, and Alec Coates and company were amongst those. So they could stretch it another probably, actually I think they could go probably another 10 to 12 laps before they even have to think about coming to pit road, which is a bit of a predicament for drivers like DeGroot, Forsyth, Peterson and company, because now they're trapped a lap down. They want to see this thing cycle back around. They don't want to see a caution.
That's it. It's kind of I'll take a little bit of a detour here for a minute. I'm seeing Joseph Morales run third here at the moment. Obviously with pit cycle and whatnot, that's kind of allowed him to run in that position. But I have noticed a marketable improvement ever since the beginning of the season, where I noticed he really struggled at Pocono and then managed to come home P11. And then past that, I've seen a constant and steady improvement. He finished P8 at Auto Club, P9 at Kentucky. Phoenix, he ended up having a P7, which was his best finish that date. Ninth at Michigan, and then managed to come up fifth at Milwaukee last week. I think he's kind of on the gist of he's kind of understanding this car a little bit more, and I think he's probably a little bit more of a threat for the rest of the season going into next season.
And maybe picking up some tricks of the trade for the rest of the competition as well. I mean, we talk about the high level of competition with drivers like DeGroot, like Ravone, like Nunez, like Forsyth, Peterson, Teed. You know, racing around these guys week after week, you've got to be picking up something that's helping you as a driver to be able to get better and better, and we're seeing pretty much the fruits of that labor coming
look
to
at
fruition
Haisong
here.
I mean, Haisong is really my best example of it, where, I mean, I've seen over the last few seasons, Haisong just keep getting faster and faster, where I think he will get to that point where he's actively contending for wins each week.
So Alec Coates continuing to show the way. He'll probably be on pit lane, I would say probably within the next 8 laps or so. He's only on the 32nd lap of this stint. Looking here at the potential battle for the lead once we end up having our top 6 dive on to pit lane. It's still nose to tail. Nick DeGroot and Craig Forsyth separated by about half a car length. So these two guys, again, hoping that this thing stays green so they can cycle back out to the front. But Forsyth, for the moment, seems content to stay behind DeGroot. They're not doing that swap back and forth here at this point in time.
Yeah, and just a minor update. I see that Charles Teed looks like he's called it a night. And honestly, I understand the frustration. I mean, like I said, you don't want to miss pit road like that. And obviously, with his good qualifying effort, he was very excited for this race. Probably was going to be one of his best finishes of the season. But that's unfortunately really the story of Charles Teed's season, where, like I said, he'll have either a good qualifying effort, he'll run fast early in the race, but something will happen around early to mid-race where he's spending the rest of his race trying to undo that mistake. And like I said, eventually everything will go right for him, but just not tonight.
You know, going back to that issue he had, we ended up seeing him try to come to pit lane with Eric Peterson. Those two had been working together in 3rd and 4th. We saw where Nick DeGroot, out of necessity, had to come to pit road a couple of laps sooner than Craig Forsyth. Do you think that this might be one of those few tracks where if you're working with somebody, it's better to come to pit lane on different laps, so that way you only have to worry about your braking zone, your car to that commitment line. You don't necessarily, if you're that second car of the tandem, have to worry about somebody else's braking zone as well as your own. It's like one extra thing to have to think about.
You know, realistically, I didn't really think about that, but you do have a point where, like I said, if I'm trying to get to pit road, I kind of have two different modes where I'd love to, if it's a pit road I'm not very familiar with, I'd love to have someone in front of me where I can kind of gauge my braking points, but I know I won't be the quickest person on the pit road that way. On the other
Oh, we got a
hand,
spinner on the pit lane, Rick Ravon. I'll let you continue, no caution.
oh, like I said, that's kind of a bad night goes to worse. But think of like this, where if I don't have anyone in front of me, I'm a little bit braver on the pit road where, like I said, if I know this pit road, I think I can push it a little bit faster, but I may take out the car in front of me if he's, like I said, maybe a lap car, maybe just isn't that familiar with this. But also, hey, if I do end up spinning and wrecking, at least I don't take out half the field.
And you ended up seeing DeGroot and Forsyth come to pit lane about 3 laps separate, and they merged back out of the track together, so not much
And
really lost in that regard.
Rick Ravon ended up just pulling it behind the wall. He is done for today.
So Rick Ravon's going to get credited for 11th, as now Alec Coates, man, all sorts of out of shape as he tried to blow that thing down. He's going to come to pit lane. That's going to give Joe McAdory the race lead. I believe this is going to be the first time McAdory has led potentially all season. I'll check back on that, but I can't recall even under green flag pit stops, the 312 taking a turn out in front, and he's got a good battle going on here with Jeff Heisong.
I think he's got his hand out the side. I think he's going to pit this time. Well, I said, ooh, look at Joseph Morales.
Wow.
I'd say man was going to try to make a pass on the pit road for the lead. I'd say more props to him. But that pit road entry is just so tricky here. Just coming off that huge embankment onto that flat apron will catch you out, especially in these cars that are so sensitive to these changes.
Joseph Morales, for those that tune into the RTG Tally Challenge series on Thursday nights, will get this reference. That pit road entry was Tim Knopfsker-esque.
Oh.
Man passes like 4 or 5 drivers before they even get to the commitment code. He's so aggressive getting onto pit lane as Heisong and Dylan McIntosh now down pit road, and this should cycle the race lead back over to the pole sitter Nick DeGroot.
Like I said, Nick DeGroot, he's kind of been in his own world, but he's had Craig Forsyth with him, and that's really what's kept him in this game. But also, look behind him where the next fastest car on his strategy, I think, would be... Correct me if I'm wrong. It would be Eric Peterson.
Yes.
And Eric Peterson, unfortunately, has lost his drafting partner here. So he's kind of had to make do where he could. So right now, it looks like he's got Alec Coates. Right now is his drafting partner.
Yes, which is good for Peterson, but maybe not so good for Alec Coates, because that means that with these two drivers completely off sequence with each other, Alec Coates in the next 20 to 23 laps, he's going to lose his drafting partner because Peterson's going to have to come to pit lane again for more fuel.
But realistically, look at this, where this is what I was saying, that the entry on the pit road is so vital. Before pit stops, Eric Peterson was about 1.5 seconds behind Forsyth and DeGroot. DeGroot. After pit stops, he's about 2.7, looks like about 2.9, 2.8 away. Like I said, he lost about a good second out of that pit entry.
Well, for Craig Forsyth now, very interesting situation. One of the top 3 drivers in the point standings, one of 3 drivers that have taken checkered flags this season, and his 2 competitors, if you will, for this championship, it seems like, down the home stretch. Both back in the garage area. Rick Ravon going to finish 11th. Luis Gonzalez-Nunez going to finish in 14th. So a lot of pressure off the 27 here tonight as well. And as we talked about earlier, it doesn't necessarily really have to get aggressive here, or I don't even think necessarily have to battle Nick DeGroot for this win. He's going to get a lot of points if he finishes in the 2nd position. Going to gain a lot of ground in the point standings. I don't know, 23-point separation between himself and Rick Ravon coming into this race, or make that 32 points rather. I can't off the top of my head remember all of the mathematics that go into the point standing scoring per race. I don't know if necessarily Forsyth would take the points lead going into Homestead, but he would certainly make it really, really close going into another 1.5-mile track.
So, judging off of last race, you do get 50 points for a win, just off of regular points, not any bonus points. 50 points for a win, 40 points for 2nd place, 35 points for 3rd. Right now, with how Rick Ravon is right now, he'd finish in P11th, so he would get approximately 19 points for this race, not including any bonus points Obviously, I don't think he met the no incidents counter. Um, and I don't believe he won. Yeah, he did not win pole position, so that's another point out of him. And I don't think he led any laps, so he didn't get any
I
bonus
don't think
points at
so. I think you're
all.
right. Yeah, I don't think he led any laps either.
So he's going to get about 19 points out of this. But Craig Forsyth, he has led laps. Like I said, I don't know if I'm pretty sure he doesn't have any incident points. And like I said, even if I right now I'm not sure if he has fastest lap, but if he gets fastest lap, that is more bonus points to just keep going to him.
Fastest lap? No, he does not have fastest lap. As a matter of fact, fastest lap currently goes to Jeff Heisong,
Wow.
24.347 for the 18.
Attaboy. That's it. He's been fast today. I think he can really sneak up into his top 3 if they may catch him sleeping.
Right now, he's got Gary Corley working with him. That's 5th and 6th position. They're trying to catch up there to Eric Peterson and Alec Coates. Trying to figure here, I believe that everybody, when they make their final pit stop, should be able to make it the rest of the way. Projected for drivers like DeGroot, Forsyth, Peterson, Corley, they're going to have to come to pit lane in the next 13 laps or so. So that would put them roughly around 38, 39 laps remaining. So that's within the 40-lap fuel window. And then, of course, for some of those other drivers like Song and Alec Coates, they can go another 10 to 15 laps further. So no doubt everybody is more than likely going to be able to make it the rest of the way on just one more pit stop. The one thing we do have to kind of take into account, though, is the fact that we've been told that once things spread out, the fuel number we're given, it exponentially gets smaller of how far they can go. So if some of these guys would be coming to pit road just underneath that 40 lap to go mark, would they have that extra little bit of fuel to be able to make it the rest of the way? Would the fuel window then go down to 35 laps and put them about 2 or 3 laps short?
I've noticed something very prevalent where if you look at Nick DeGroot and Craig Forsyth, you'll notice they've stopped swapping. They've really just started riding around. And right now we're running about 0.2, 0.3 seconds off the pace of what Eric Peterson and Alec Coates is running. But I'm betting that Eric Peterson's going to have to pit a little bit before Forsyth and DeGroot. And that is a huge strategy shift off of last time where DeGroot was the first one on pit road. I honestly think that Eric Peterson may be one of the first takers on pit road just because he's trying so aggressively to reach these two.
Is there some way, if you're DeGroot and Forsyth, that you can maybe coast it into the corner a little bit here, try and save a little fuel that way? I mean, we've seen Forsyth pull off fuel strategy back at Auto Club at the beginning of the season, so there's no doubt that he's learned some of the things you can do at the bigger speedways to be able to save that extra drop or two.
I mean, here's how I'm thinking in my mind. If I'm Forsyth or DeGroot, I'm talking to, obviously, my other pair in second or first saying, hey, right now, I think if we let Teed catch us, it isn't going to be that big of a deal. And what I mean by that is, obviously, we've been able to prove that we're able to get on and off a pit road faster. And that when we really start swapping and drafting together, we can be fast. So that's good. So I've noticed that Peterson hasn't really got on pit road as quickly, and he's lost his drafting partner where right now all he has is Alec Coates. And that's the reason he's working so aggressively trying to get up to this pack. Because he knows that Alec Coates is probably going to pit here in a few laps. And the moment he loses him, he loses all of his forward momentum. So he's trying to reach the back wing of Craig Forsyth. But I think if I'm Forsyth and DeGroot, I'd be bold and let Peterson catch us. Because he's going to probably have to pit a little bit earlier. And I know he can't get on and off a pit road as fast as I can.
And we're going to be seeing, obviously, as well, pit road coming to play one more time here tonight. And it's already kind of played havoc with a few drivers this evening. We saw Rayvon Spin getting onto pit road. Charles Teed couldn't get woed up in time, and he ended up missing pit lane. We even saw Craig Forsyth nearly lose it when he tried to woe it down to the commitment line the first time it came to pit road. So this is the money stop, and if there's one word we've overused all season long, and we'll probably continue to do it here in the second half of the season, it's execution. Oh! What a Tokyo drift!
Look at Peterson, though. Look at how much
Man,
time he gained.
he did indeed. Peterson only about 2 car lengths, maybe at most, off the back of Nick DeGroot coming to pit lane. Big attack to that commitment line for the 36.
Well, I guess I'll take back what I said about Peterson. He looks like he can enter
But
pit road pretty
he
good.
might have been listening in. Who knows?
That's a good on Peterson. Well, I said, but that really gets him back in this, where if he can get out of pit road almost exactly at the same time the Groot does, he really has just clawed himself back into this.
But now the big question for both those drivers is they came to pit road
Oh.
with 41 laps to go. That was only about 36 laps into the stint. So by my calculations, they can't make it the rest of the way.
It may be needing for a splash and go late on. But that brings back the question that we have almost every week, where is it worth it to short pit maybe 10, 15 into this run, take new tires, or possibly just take a splash and keep going? Or is it worth it to run it all the way out, take a splash, or maybe take just a little bit more and new tires and hope just to run away?
Dylan McIntosh just came to pit lane. I'm keeping an eye on two things: the number of laps left and the number of laps that Craig Forsyth has been on this stint. Right now, 39 laps to go. When he last hit the line, he just completed his 35th lap on this stint, just put his 36th lap up on the board. He needs to be right on the numbers if he's going to be able to make it on fuel, and even then it might still be a big question mark. He might have to make sure he re-emerges after his pit stop with DeGroot and Eric Peterson to get the aid of a little bit of draft.
Yeah, I'd say I'm a little bit out on this stretch. I don't know.
Oh, DeGroot's back in.
Oh, he sped. Oh, no.
Well, he's sitting in his pit stall.
Let me double check.
Is he
Pit
topping
road's-
off? Is he topping off the fuel tank, perhaps? If he sped, they would have held him.
No, they wouldn't have held him. If he sped on something like exit.
Oh, that's a possibility.
I think he actually sped on entry, but they didn't give him the speeding ticket until he left pit road.
Well, we saw him in that four-wheel slide coming to the commitment line. Speaking of coming to pit road, here comes Craig Forsyth. So he's coming to pit lane. 36 to go on the board, and I believe that was his 38th lap completed. It's gonna be really close if you're that 27.
I want to say that Forsyth can make it, but I don't want to say Forsyth can make it because he had draft to do it. He's going to have to try and link up with either a lap car or someone to kind of make it to the end.
Coates going to inherit the lead. So one thing we know for certain: Coates, Hysong, Morales, McAdory, Jason Hand. Those five, they still have to come to pit lane, but they will definitely be able to make it to the conclusion of this race once they do. Forsyth's going to be the big question mark. He's going to kind of be the measuring stick for everybody else, because if he can make it, then maybe Gary Corley can make it, and if Corley can make it, then maybe Peterson can make it. I mean, a lot of drivers kind of placing their destiny in their fuel tanks here.
I don't think Peterson can make it. I'm out on that, but I noticed that Peterson's the only one who has draft here at the moment, while Forsyth is all alone. So, like I said, I don't know. I still think that Peterson maybe pitted just a little bit too early to make it.
Well, it's going to be crunch time here, closing on 30 laps to go. Yeah, Nick DeGroot now returning to the track 3 laps down. He had a 30-second penalty that he had to serve. That's a tough break for a guy that started, excuse me, started on the pole, led the most laps, and was certainly looking like he was going to be the favorite to take this checkered flag. Finished runner-up at his first start earlier on this season at Michigan, but I think Kansas talked about it, execution on pit road, and it came back to bite even a multi-time champion like DeGroot.
That pit road is so hard to get into. It's part of the challenge is getting on the pit road, but the other part of the challenge is getting slowed down. Since I've noticed the entry onto this pit road is a lot shorter than we've had a lot of this season. Honestly, Milwaukee may have matched this track in difficulty of entering pit road. But I've noticed that Alec Coates is still running. Same for Jeff Hysong and Joseph Morales. I think they can make it to the end on this next stop.
Yeah, they've got about little less than, well, I would say about 10 laps max that they can run before they have to come to pit lane, which, in some regards is also going to be good because they wouldn't necessarily have to take on as much fuel as if it was a full fuel run. I mean, if we project that they could go 35 to 40 laps on a tank of fuel, they'd only have to probably take 50% capacity with 20 laps left to go.
I think it's going to be a race to the end, just trying to figure out if you can make it, but also how close you're going to be.
Jason Hand giving up the 5th position. He's come to pit road now, so apparently feels the fuel window is open to make it the rest of the way. Here comes race leader Alec Coates in. So these drivers are pitting with 30 laps to go. So, with single car runs, is 30 laps the furthest these drivers can make it? If that's the case, Forsyth could even still be in trouble.
I see Joseph Morales is coming on the pit road this time. I think Jeff Hysong probably will keep coming on the pit road either this time or next time. Could be wrong. Looks like he's staying on the track. But Joseph Morales is coming on this time. Joe McAdory is still staying out as well. Now, McAdory and Morales pit on the same lap last time. So a little bit of difference here.
Hysong, 33 laps on this run. 34 for Joe McAdory. And once those two come to pit lane, it will have completed our second cycle of green flag pit stops.
McAdory's
It would put Craig Forsyth back out as the race leader. And here's the biggest thing that is going to be an issue for Craig Forsyth. Came back on the track, nobody around him. So he has no aid of draft whatsoever. You go back to Eric Peterson, the 36, same situation. Nobody around to be able to get any draft off of.
Oh, looking here. I'm divided on this. I'm a coin flip at the moment. I don't know.
I saw on pit road, Joe McAdory pitted just behind him. So, in just a few moments, you'll see the 27 jump back up to the top of the leaderboard, Craig Forsyth.
The big question is, did Eric Peterson save enough fuel riding behind that car to get enough draft? Or does Craig Forsyth have enough to make it on his own?
Yeah, if he's got enough, he's going to have to make it 35 to 36 laps by himself. No drafting partners around him. He's got Peterson right now. Actually, he's got Alec Coates, rather, back in second. Jeff Hysong cycles to third. Peterson's all the way back to fourth. So I wonder if Peterson, based off of our telemetry when they all came to pit lane, should have cycled out to second. Has Peterson been in fuel save mode?
I think Peterson might have. Now, obviously, Peterson's at a little bit more of a disadvantage here just because he's had to end up. He's had to save more.
He's in fuel save mode. I can tell you that right now.
I think he's pitting. He's pitting.
Right, he is.
So an alternative strategy.
Yeah.
Now, do you take tires on this stop?
I don't know why you would.
I mean, maybe the advantage would be having a little bit fresher. I mean, when Forsyth has 30, 40 lap old tires, I'd have new tires, but I'm not really sure of the fall off here. And honestly, it looks like the fall off is just non-existent. He's stopping. Car staying on the ground. Looks like he's just taking gas to go.
Yep. No Firestones going onto that 36. They're just going to give him enough fuel to get to the end, send him back out.
I think Eric believes that him not having to hit the brakes or at least coast at all will give him the best opportunity to go win this race.
Well, I asked you the question coming into tonight. 3 different drivers have won the first 7 races of this season. Would we see a different driver break into that win column here tonight? 2 of those drivers in the garage area, Rick Rayvon, Luis Gonzalez-Nunez. Craig Forsyth right now, very questionable on whether he can make it the rest of the way on what he's got in the tank. If he can't, look at some of the drivers we've got in the conversation to pick up their first win of the season. Alec Coates right now runs in second, trying to get that one position he was short in the season opener at Pocono. Jeff Hysong right now in the 3rd position. Joseph Morales, who had that amazing move on the last lap in New Hampshire last week. Or I'm sorry, correction, not New Hampshire. It was
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, the other flat short track. Ended up getting that top 5 run. He's right now in the 4th position. All 3 of these drivers, based off calculations, they can make it on fuel.
Well, I said, I'm hoping for a lot of these guys just to kind of come up and show out here, because all of these guys are good on fuel, but Craig Forsyth has that big question mark over his head of, I don't know if he's good on fuel or not.
Look at the last couple of racetracks we've been at. You had Milwaukee Mile last week. You had the 2-mile Speedway / Super Speedway of Michigan. You had Phoenix the week before. You had to go all the way back to mid-August before you went to a 1.5-mile track. And we can see how the 1.5-mile Kansas has come into play in the type of race that we've had in the closing stages here, the players that are up at the front. And we get to do it all again with more 1.5-mile track racing next week when these drivers head to the southeast United States at the Homestead Miami Speedway.
The biggest surprise has to be Jeff Hysong, because he has not been markedly great on these 1.5-mile or mile-plus tracks. And he's really come out and showed out today just out of fuel strategy.
Right on board here with our race leader, Craig Forsyth. Let's see if there's any telltale signs of him maybe trying to save a little bit of fuel. Keeping it in high gear, 6th gear. I don't think we've seen a single driver we've been on board with here tonight running any lower than 6th gear.
Right now, Forsyth's times haven't really dropped off at all.
No.
They don't seem like they've been dropping off, so I wonder if he knows he doesn't have enough in the tank.
Yeah. So try and build as big a gap as you can over 2nd place and see if you can not drop as many spots down the running order as you would if you were in fuel safe mode, perhaps.
Unless he's confident he can make it to the end.
Oh, I mean,
which power move if he is.
He may be confident. He's got the fuel numbers, but my calculations have me pretty nervous for him. I mean, he's got to make it another 14 circuits, which means that he would have to go 36 laps on this fuel run.
Like I said, Eric Peterson's a lap down here at the moment. So like I said, I think he's kind of lost his chance out on here. I never thought I'd see our top 5 be Forsyth, Coates, Hysong, Morales, and McAdory.
If you're close on making it on fuel, let's say you're about a lap short, is it too late for the 27 to start saving at this point in time?
I mean, realistically, I would have started saving before this run, knowing just because, hey, I'm not going to make it to the finish because I have no draft. I would have started saving as soon as I left pit road, but realistically, I think he's realized, or at least determined with himself, either he can make it, or the only way he's going to be competitive in this is if he runs it all the way to the end.
Lap times still are advantage to the 27. Last time by a 7.36 to the 7.63 by Alec Coates. This time by about a 10.5 quicker still for Craig Forsyth. But if you're Alec Coates, you've got to go as well because you've got to keep that pressure on Craig Forsyth. If he's close on the numbers, you've got to force the issue and try to see if you can get him below that of the amount of laps that he can make. Because you know you can make it the rest of the way if you're the 10 car. Wow, having some problems here.
Man,
can I make a sentence? We'll find out.
What a reversal. Victor Groot, who's led most of this race, is currently behind Joseph Morales, who is P4. That is a role reversal. I've heard one.
Groot 2 laps down. Started from the pole position. Led the most laps here tonight.
How quickly things can change.
You're not kidding. I mean, you said it. Entirely unique cast of characters up here inside of the top 5. Outside of Craig Forsyth, who may be exiting stage left to pit road here in these last 9 laps.
Honestly, this is much of a waiting game. Now, I'm kind of running through the rest of my head is Hysong actually has enough, or Morales actually has enough. I noticed they took a little bit shorter pit stops. They should, by my numbers, be able to make it. But notice their times are slowing down a little bit.
You know, I'm actually going back remembering that race at Auto Club that Craig Forsyth ended up winning. Don't forget, that was, by IndyCar standards, a photo finish. Forsyth won that race by a second and a half over David Cook because he ran out of fuel going into turn 3, was able to coast across the start finish line just before Cook got to him. Look at the interval right now between first and second, about 2.2 seconds. If Forsyth runs out of fuel on the final lap, even if it's over in turn 3 or the middle of turns 3 and 4, I think Coates is close enough that he would be able to get Forsyth at the start-finish line.
And I think that's the reason why I think Forsyth may be pushing it here. Even if he is fairly good or may just run out in the final lap, like I said, I'd rather get second running out than possibly, like I said, pit and then I'll get fifth.
Alec Coates, last couple of laps, he's been able to equal the lap times of Craig Forsyth, keeping that gap even at 2.2 seconds. That time by lost a little bit of time, a couple of hundredths, but as long as he can keep it, I think within, what, maybe 3 seconds or so, and if Forsyth runs out of fuel, Coates has got a shot at this thing.
Like I said, I'm not that confident anymore that Forsyth's going to run out of fuel. Like I said, I don't see his lines changing. I don't see his attitude changing. Right now, it looks like he's just running at full speed.
4 laps to go. Total of 6 miles to decide it here. Forsyth looking for his 3rd win on the season. Looking to either close up or take the points lead in the overall standings heading into Homestead, Miami next week. Alec Coates looking to not play bridesmaid for the 2nd time this season. He wants that 1st win on the year. And Jeff Hysong back there in the 3rd position looking for another solid podium finish here tonight to keep himself up there inside of the, well, actually, it would actually keep him up inside the top 3 in points because it was close between himself and Nunez for 3rd place coming into the scene. I think it was 2 or 3 points, and Nunez finishing this race 14th out of 14 drivers. So Hysong's going to put himself not only on the podium here tonight in the race, but back up in the podium in the overall point standings.
Well, I said that's really what matters, and I'm kind of, like I said, I'm a huge big picture racing. That's a yes, race wins are great, race finishes, podium finishes are great, but it's the big picture that we got to worry about at the end of the season.
White flag in the air. We're on board with Forsyth. Let's listen and see if there's any sputtering or can he keep that thing wide open this final mile and a half at Kansas. Pinned right down there on the white line. Looks like that car is still up to speed as he enters into 3 and 4. Speed decreasing a little bit, picks up the throttle. He's going to make it. Craig Forsyth, what a job tonight on fuel strategy. Picks up win number 3 here tonight at Kansas.
I'd say Craig Forsyth has been putting on these master classes of fuel strategy all season. I'd say I have not seen him put a foot wrong yet, but this is a huge night for him. When Rick Ravon and Luis Gonzalez Nunez both have issues, he's really able to capitalize on it and take the victory.
Absolutely. Well, I could say I was holding this nugget back for later on, but I actually forgot about it. Kansas has only been run on the Dark Horse Racing Series schedule one other time. That was last season. Guess who the winner of that race was?
Maybe Craig Forsyth.
You got it.
Huh.
So, you know, maybe he already knew coming into tonight what the field numbers were.
Well, I said things could vary season to season, but usually it's mostly track conditions. So you still have the same strategy in head. You can roughly go off of it.
35 laps is what he had to make that final stint by himself. No draft aided, but he was able to get there underpowered, never ran out of fuel, never heard a sputter there on that final lap. Right to the numbers there for driver 27, and that is his 3rd win on the season. That now makes him 2 for 2 in the mile and a half's run this season so far. And of course, next week at Homestead, he'll look to make it 3 for 3. But to your point as well, the big picture racing here tonight as well for him to be able to get all of those points after the hardships tonight by Rick Ravon and Luis Gonzalez Nunez. He's got that momentum down the home stretch here, second half of the season. Let's take a look at the finishing results from tonight's race. And again, a lot of attaboys here in the top of the running order for the final finishing results.
I said, I am so proud of Jeff Highsong and Joseph Morales. It's even Joe McAdory really pulling off that 3-4-5 finish. Same thing for Alec Coates. Love to see him up here in the top three. Gary Corley, he's a guy who doesn't really get a lot of love, finishing top 10. Eric Peterson, hey, listen, it wasn't a rep that took him out, but listen, he was here at the end of, after all these accidents and all these incidents that put a lot of these guys out of the race, he was able to still claw through with a P7.
It would have been interesting to note just where Eric Peterson was projected of how short he would have been to make it the rest of the way because he came to pit road, what, 3, 4 laps, I think, before Craig Forsyth did. Forsyth was able to make it. Would Peterson have been able to make it? Obviously, we'll never know, but it would have been very interesting to see if the 36 had stayed out, played the same strategy, if he'd have reached the conclusion of this race. Nick DeGroot talked about the dominating performance he had here tonight. The only thing that got him in the end was pit road. Ended up getting that late speeding penalty, and will end up finishing in the 8th position. Jason Hand, Dylan McIntosh, they reached the conclusion, but multiple laps down as well. They will finish inside of the top 10. Second page shows you the drivers that did not reach the conclusion of this race. The most notables, obviously, Rick Ravon, Luis Gonzalez Nunez being first and third in overall points coming to this race. Obviously, heartbreak there for Charles Teed as well, who was the first half of the race up inside of the top 5, but much like DeGroot, pit road was the Achilles heel for him.
And realistically, I think when Charles Teed ended up making his mistake, that kind of put the nail in the coffin for Eric Peterson just to kind of have to change strategies. And he kind of had to go with what he thought was best, but it ended up burning just a little bit too much fuel.
That's a good call. Be interesting to see what these drivers are going to take away from the race here tonight in Kansas to prepare for another mile-and-a-half track. Entirely different configuration, but mile-and-a-half in length nonetheless when these drivers go to Homestead, Miami next week. Let's see what some of the drivers thought about the racing and the strategy here tonight. Let's see if we can kick things off with Jeff Highsong, the driver of the number 18.
I don't see Jeff Highsong here.
I think you're right.
That's it. He hasn't been over here in a while, so like I said, just give him a minute. Find his way to the booth.
Yeah, we'll give him a minute here. While we're waiting on him, I think we do have our second place finisher here on standby, Alec Coates. So let's talk with him. Hey, Alec, it's Matt and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
I got you guys.
Well, man, I'll tell you what. It was turned into a nail biter for us up here in the booth because obviously we don't have access to the fuel numbers you guys have down there in the cars, but didn't know if that 27 could make it on fuel, and if he couldn't, you were right there within striking distance to get around him if he started to sputter in that final lap or two. I mean, what was the strategy as the second place driver for you there on that final stint in regards to how you approached the closing in on the 27?
Yeah, I mean, you can't really. I mean, the laps are just so similar here. I wasn't going to close much. I just wide open and run qualifying laps and see if we can close the gap. I knew he was going to be close, but Craig does it to us every single week with fuel. So had a feeling he was going to be right on the number and make it. So I was kind of just riding at that point and hoping I was wrong. But it sounds like he only had a quarter of a lap left.
Well, I have to ask you, since I said you almost won Pocono earlier this season out of just the kind of chaos that happened on the last lap. That's it. You almost won tonight. I have to ask, I mean, do you kind of see your luck changing at Homestead, or is it going to be kind of more of the same?
Fortunately, I'll be working a karting event next week,
Oh, no.
so I will be out again. It sucks that I've had to miss some races this season because I've had pretty good runs when I've showed up. So, but hopefully back for the remainder of the season and try to get a win. I'm starting to feel like that was one of my better chances. I did not think they were gonna make it, but then again, Craig's gonna Craig, and hey, I beat Teed, so that's always my main goal.
Now, Alex, we saw, at least in the early stages of this race, it seemed like it really came down to track position. If you could keep your car down that white line, anyone behind you just could not be able to get enough of a run, enough momentum to be able to pass you for that spot. You made the call under that second caution to come down to pit road. A couple of other drivers did the same. Was the mentality then and there feeling that this thing was going to go green to the end and it was going to come down to fuel numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. As I've said when I spoke to you guys before, I never really plan out strategy, which is usually what costs me every time. But I had the 40 lap number kind of in my head in the draft all day. And when that caution came out and I saw lap 40, even though we had just pitted, I was like, I'm going here. Because then if I just stay in the draft and make it another 40-40, it should be one less stop than everybody else. So I kind of made that one on the fly, and it finally kind of worked out for me in my favor. It just one position too short.
A great run for you here tonight. Almost had the strategy play into your favor. Still bring it home on the podium, though, in P2. Congratulations on a job well done. Before we let you go, we'll give you the opportunity to do some thank you spots and shout-outs.
Yeah, as always, just to the league. These guys run a great event. It's always nice to get on here and just turn some laps and have some fun. And then TJ and Daddy Mac Designs for always making me look good out there.
Alec Coates brings it home. Second place here tonight under the lights at the Kansas Speedway. Congratulations once again.
Thank you guys. Thanks as always for the broadcast.
Still does not look like we have Jeff Heisung available, so let's go down to victory lane. Three-time winner Craig Forsyth here tonight at Kansas. Hey Craig, is Matt and Seth up here in the FRM booth? You got us?
You betcha, guys. How are you doing tonight?
Well, we're doing good. I'll bet you're doing better, though, because, my goodness, we ended up hearing from some of the other drivers a quarter of a lap left in the tank. We thought, based off of calculations, you might not be able to make it the rest of the way. So, I mean, first off, talk about the confidence you had once you'd made that pit stop of being able to make it the rest of the way. Did you at any point think you had to maybe go into fuel save just a little bit to make it to the conclusion? Or did you feel that the number you pitted, that was the number you needed to be able to just flat-foot it all the way to the checkered flag?
Well, I knew coming in that anything after lap 20, before lap 30-ish, was going to be had fuel save potential. And then I think the caution was on 30 or 26 or something, at which point it was like, okay, so I can turn this into a fuel save. And then just the next two stints were dedicated to be doing the fuel save, doing some swap drafting with Nick just to make sure that we kept the gap to the guys behind us. And then Nick had a unfortunate screw up in the pit lane, which that was a concern for me because as soon as I didn't have a draft partner on that last one, I had to do quick calculations to figure out what I still going to be able to make it. And I ran most of that last stint at about 90% throttle and still ran out of fuel going into turn one after the start finish line. So it was very tight.
So let me ask you, because you did steal one of my questions, but how difficult was it to get on pit road? Because we saw a lot of pit road issues tonight. Rick Ravon ended up spinning on pit road. Charles Teed missed pit road entirely. And Eric Peterson had a lot of trouble getting on pit road. I mean, how did you kind of conquer that?
I honestly, on the first green flag pit cycle, I didn't. I stupidly tried to come down off the apron and almost went around. It was super close. And then that was when I realized what was I doing? I need to, you need to stay in that bottom groove until you've got, the car woed down enough that it's not going to do anything crazy. So that was the important part, is you needed to have the space behind you and the traffic behind you aware enough that you could do the most of the initial slowdown still on the track where you had grip.
There's points of a season, especially a series like this, where it comes down to consistent finishes week after week, accumulating the most points by the end of the season to hoist that championship trophy. Here tonight could very well be one of those kind of turning point races. We ended up seeing a very close proximity still between yourself, Rick Ravon, obviously with Nunez's win last week, kind of put himself back in the conversation, but by the end of the night, you're in victory lane. Both of them didn't finish inside of the top 10. And we've got another mile and a half track coming up at Homestead next week. So, as a driver, do you feel that the tides have turned and now down this home stretch, this is where you're going to make that charge towards the championship trophy?
Oh, I'm sure going to try to make the charge, but there's no certainty in racing. And I mean, especially with the level of competition we've got. So all it takes is, a mistake-free race, and suddenly everything's flipped around. And all it takes is me making a mistake, with 5 to go, where I don't have the opportunity to recover from it. I mean, that's the important one. If you're going to make mistakes, if you can make them early enough in the race that you have the opportunity to have the chance through, other cautions, that type of thing, to try and rework it so that you can maximize what you can get out of a mistake that you've made. So yeah, it's. I mean, this is going to be a fight right to the end. I mean, the drivers in this league are too good to be otherwise.
Just one final question for you as well. We talked about before we ended up doing the driver interviews the fact that you guys have only been to Kansas one other time. That was last season, and you were the defending winner. Was there anything from last year that you were able to bring in as far as notes and whatnot to approach tonight's race?
I did not remember that I won it last season. Oh, so no.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Well, no, that's fine. That's fine. I forgot to bring up that stat until post race too. So but Craig, obviously, tremendous win for you here tonight. Congratulations. As we heard from some of the other drivers, we're now going to call whenever it comes down to fuel number. So you take a checkered flag. You've Craiged the field. Apparently, that's the term that has been called now. But man, before we let you go and celebrate your third win of the season, we'll turn the mic over to you for some Victory Lane thank you sponsors and shout outs.
I got to thank Jim over at 4D Racewear, team sponsor. Once again, keeps us going. It's and again, the whole everyone at Dark Horse. I mean, all the guys. I think we had a 15 or 16 car field tonight. That was good to see. It was good to get most of the guys out there. As you get into the season, you start to get the smaller fields. So it's nice to see some of the guys being able to get the time to come back. And no, you guys over at FRN, and it's good seeing both of you, Seth, Matt. No, I look forward to next week. I'm hoping for another good race. That's a more difficult track. Those walls come up a lot faster on you. So we'll see. Hopefully we're back we're back on the podium next week. That'd be nice.
That's Craig Forsyth. He's your winner here tonight at the Kansas Speedway. Third win on the season, and now official with the standings in. New points leader heading into Homestead Miami Speedway. So congratulations on that, Craig. Go enjoy your victory, and we look forward to seeing what you do next week.
Thanks, guys. Stay safe.
And that's going to wrap up our coverage here tonight. Looks like we unfortunately are not going to be able to get a word with our third place finisher, Jeff Hysong, bringing it home on the podium here this evening. One thing that just stood out to me here, Matt, we ended up seeing a half dozen drivers. A lot of our top contenders have issues here tonight, whether it be on the track or on pit road. And then Craig Forsyth says, yeah, we're going to a tougher track next week. I mean, if this is tough tonight, I don't know what's in store for these guys when we get to Homestead.
Yeah, I'd say, at least I will say Homestead Miami's pit road feels, at least to me, a little bit easier to enter. However, they may also have to use that access road, so that's going to be a fun experience.
Let's talk points real quick, because as mentioned, Craig Forsyth now the new points leader. 3 points over Rick Ravon going into next week. Jeff Hysong now might be that underlying currents there. He's 84 points out, jumped up to third in the point standing. So, I mean, he could be that kind of guy just outside looking in down this home stretch. But Forsyth, Ravon, the rivalry continues between these two.
I mean, if Hysong just keeps getting lucky, or really just kind of keeps the consistency. I mean, go in the Indy where it's a double points race, win Indy, and hey, I mean, if you're within spitting distance, you could easily go take this.
And let's not forget, too, I believe that Jeff Hysong, he's made all the starts this season. So we were talking earlier about drop races. Take a drop race out for him. Who knows where he's going to be mathematically in regards to those drivers as well. But for Ravon and now Nunez, the hardships here tonight, what do you have to do now to kind of combat that, get those points back going into Homestead next week? Because again, if it's a tougher racetrack, you got to be a little bit more conservative, I would think. Make sure you at least bring that car home in one piece.
I said that's what I would think. Obviously, right now, a lot of people need to go points racing. Really, Forsyth and Ravon really need to focus on points racing right now. Obviously, Ravon needs to keep in mind that he most likely will miss Iowa. So if he doesn't have Iowa in his back pocket, and he's going to have to take probably that drop week, where the drop week will not be very well accessible, I said that's not going to be a good scenario for him. So he needs to go point racing and make sure that he gets as many points as possible, just trying to brace for that. Now, Craig Forsyth just needs to keep doing what he's doing, because he's been doing a very good job of just not putting himself into a lot of risk and just doing what he's been really doing well as of recent, which is just staying consistent. all he needs to do really at this point is right now it is a fair game, winner take all, whoever is finishing higher than the other. If Forsyth keeps up this consistency, I can't see him losing this.
Well, the second half of the season continues next week when these drivers head to the Homestead Miami Speedway. A lot of tough tracks afterwards leading up to that season finale, the Indianapolis 500. Going to be a lot of fun to see how it all unfolds. We appreciate everybody tuning in to our coverage here tonight from the Kansas Speedway. Congratulations once again to Craig Forsyth, the fuel strategy king here, it seems, in the Dark Horse Racing Series as he gets his third win on the season. Matt, it's been a thriller here tonight. Non-stop action. I appreciate you joining me up in the booth.
As always, thanks for having me.
And again, we'll see you guys next Sunday night at the Homestead Miami Speedway here for the Dark Horse Racing Series presented by Troy Lead Designs. That'll be Sunday, October the 9th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's when the green flag will fly. Until then, from Matthew Rodriguez, I'm Seth Cole. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday night, folks. You've been watching another broadcast courtesy of FRN, the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.